The rain battered the windows of Northwood High, turning the empty hallway into a distorted tunnel of gray shadows. Sarah adjusted her cardigan, gripping a stack of graded history essays. She walked with a soft, rhythmic tread, a habit from a life she had buried 3 years ago. The school was silent, save for the distant hum of the floor buffer. She shouldn't have been here this late, but Principal Hawthorne had asked for her specifically. "Just a quick chat about the curriculum," he had said. His voice had been trembling. Sarah reached the heavy oak door of the principal's office. It was ajar. A cold draft snaked around her ankles, carrying the metallic scent of fresh ink and something else, something copper and raw. Her instincts, dormant but never gone, flared. She didn't knock. She pushed the door open with her elbow, keeping her fingerprints off the brass handle. Hawthorne was at his desk, or rather, slumped over it. Sarah didn't scream. She didn't drop the papers. She stepped inside, closing the door silently behind her, and locked it. She moved to the desk, her eyes scanning the room in a grid pattern. No struggle, no overturned chairs, just Hawthorne, face down, his skin a waxy gray. A massive heart attack, a layman would say. Sarah saw the tiny puncture wound on his neck, barely visible beneath his collar, a chemical induce. On the desk, pristine and centered, sat a cream-colored envelope. The letter inside was pulled halfway out. 2 words were typed in bold sans-serif font: "Stop digging." Hawthorne had ignored it. Beside his cold hand lay a shovel-shaped tie clip, a strange trinket he never wore. Sarah leaned in. The clip wasn't decorative. It was a USB drive disguised as jewelry. Footsteps echoed in the outer office. Heavy boots. 2 men, maybe 3. They weren't school security. The cadence was military grade, tactical spacing. Sarah snatched the tie clip, slipping it into her bra strap. She grabbed a red grading pen from the desk, a poor weapon, but better than nothing. She heard the handle of the office door rattle. "Locked," a deep voice grunted. "Kick it." Sarah scanned the room. No exit, just the large window overlooking the wet football field 3 stories down. She wasn't a teacher anymore. In that split second, the history department vanished. The operative was back. She backed into the shadows of the supply closet just as the wood splintered and the door crashed open. The men who entered didn't look like murderers. They looked like concerned citizens, wearing generic paramedics' uniforms. But Sarah, watching through the slats of the louvered closet door, noted the details. They moved with economy, no wasted motion. One checked Hawthorne's pulse, while the other immediately began sweeping the desk, dumping files into a black bag. "Target is neutralized," the first man whispered into a lapel mic. "Searching for the drive. It's not on the desk." Sarah controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate to a near hibernation crawl. If they had thermal imaging, she was dead. If they were just hired muscle, she had a chance. They were looking for the tie clip. They knew Hawthorne had been digging into something dangerous enough to kill for. "Check the safe," the second man ordered. As they turned their backs, the hallway lights flickered. Someone else was coming. "Hey, who's in there?" It was Miller, the school's head of security, a former cop with a chip on his shoulder and a gut that hung over his belt, but he was loud. The fake paramedics froze. The dynamic shifted instantly. They couldn't kill a witness this early. "Medical emergency," the leader barked, smoothing his uniform. "Principal collapsed. We're moving him." Sarah seized the confusion. She slipped out of the closet, keeping low behind the filing cabinets, and emerged near the broken door just as Miller waddled into the room, blocking the fake paramedics' exit. "I didn't call 911, Miller said, his hand drifting to his belt. "Mrs. Vance did," Sarah said, stepping into the light. "Oh my God, is he okay? I found him. I ran to get help." The 3 men stared at Sarah. The killers assessed her as a non-threat, a cardigan-wearing schoolteacher clutching papers. Miller puffed up, taking charge. "Step back, Sarah," Miller commanded. "You guys, let me see ID." The moment of violence passed, suppressed by the routine of bureaucracy. The killers loaded Hawthorne onto a gurney, exchanging a look that promised they would return for the drive. Sarah played the part of the grieving colleague, trembling as she leaned against the wall, but her eyes memorized their faces, their shoe treads, and the specific barcode on their equipment bags. The game had begun, and Northwood High was the board. By the next morning, the official story was solidified. Principal Hawthorne had died of natural causes, a tragic cardiac event. The school flag flew at half-mast, flapping listlessly in the damp wind. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with performative grief. The vice principal, a slick man named Vance with a smile that never reached his eyes, assumed command immediately. Sarah stood at the front of her classroom, writing "The Prohibition Era" on the whiteboard. Her hand was steady. "Corruption often hides in plain sight," she told the class, her voice calm. "It requires infrastructure, tunnels, smuggling routes, payoffs." In the back row, Leo, a scholarship student with a mind for coding and a reputation for trouble, looked up. He wasn't taking notes, he was staring at her. Leo was the only one who noticed things others missed. He tapped his pen on his desk in a sequence. ... Morse code. LIAR. Sarah paused. She ignored the signal but marked him as an asset, or a liability. During her planning period, she retreated to the library. She plugged the shovel-shaped USB drive into a quarantined laptop she kept in her satchel, an unauthorized piece of tech with military-grade encryption. The drive was password-protected, but the hint was simple: 1924, the year the school's original foundation was laid. The files opened. They weren't curriculum updates, they were architectural blueprints, not of the school as it was, but as it was becoming. The gym renovation project that had been plaguing the campus with noise for months wasn't a renovation. The blueprints showed excavation going far deeper than a swimming pool. They were digging a bunker, or a vault. "Mrs. Cross?" Sarah snapped the laptop shut. Mrs. Vane, the guidance counselor, stood at the end of the aisle. Vane was a woman of sharp angles and excessive perfume, always probing into the staff's mental health with predatory interest. "Rough day," Vane purred, stepping closer. "Hawthorne was fond of you. Did he say anything before the end?" "I just found him, Brenda," Sarah said, clutching her cardigan. "I didn't talk to him." "Strange," Vane murmured, her eyes drifting to Sarah's bag. "Miller said the cameras showed you entering the office 10 minutes before the alarm. That's a long time to stand in a room with a dead body." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Vane wasn't just a counselor, she was a gatekeeper. Sarah adjusted her glasses, letting a flash of nervousness color her expression. "I was in shock, Brenda. I froze. Haven't you ever been too scared to move?" Vane studied her for a long second, looking for a crack in the timid teacher persona. "Fear is a reaction, Sarah. Silence is a choice. Be careful. Grief makes people irrational." Vane walked away, her heels clicking like a countdown. She knew she was burned. They suspected she had taken something. She had to move fast. That afternoon, during the chaotic dismissal, Sarah slipped away from the bus duty roster. She made her way to the basement levels, past the boiler room and the janitorial storage. The air grew cooler, smelling of wet earth and concrete dust. The construction zone was cordoned off with yellow tape and plywood sheets. "Stop digging," she whispered to herself, Hawthorne's warning. She bypassed the padlock on the plywood door with a tension wrench from her pocket, popping the mechanism in 3 seconds. Inside, the noise of the school faded. The gym construction was a massive hole in the earth, lit by industrial floodlights. It wasn't a pool, it was an extraction point. Sarah crouched behind a stack of drywall. Below, in the mud, men were working. Not construction workers, they wore hazmat gear. They weren't building, they were pulling things out of the ground, rusted metal drums. Sarah zoomed in with her phone camera. The drums were marked with a faded logo she recognized from a briefing 10 years ago. Ethelgard Chemical, a company that supposedly vanished in the 80s after a massive illegal dumping scandal. Northwood High had been built on top of a toxic graveyard, and someone was quietly cleaning it up, not to save the kids, but to recover something hidden inside the waste. "Hey!" A flashlight beam hit her face. A guard on the scaffolding had spotted the reflection of her lens. Sarah didn't play the teacher this time. She vaulted over the drywall, sprinting into the maze of the boiler room pipes just as the radio crackled behind her. "Intruder in Sector 4. Lock it down." Sarah moved through the steam tunnels, her breathing controlled, her mind mapping the schematics she had memorized from the USB drive. The school was a labyrinth of old and new architecture, and she knew the pinch points. She emerged in the girls' locker room, blending instantly into a group of volleyball players heading for the exit. She made it to her car, but she didn't leave. She waited. 20 minutes later, Leo walked out the side exit. He didn't head for the buses. He walked toward the bike rack, head down, hoodie up. Sarah pulled her sedan alongside him and rolled down the window. "Get in, Leo." He flinched, looking ready to run. "I didn't do it, Mrs. Cross." "I know you didn't, but you know what it is. Get in, now." Leo hesitated, then threw his bike into the bushes and jumped into the passenger seat. Sarah peeled out of the lot, checking her mirrors for a tail. A black SUV pulled out 3 cars behind them, standard surveillance distance. "You're not a history teacher," Leo said, his voice shaking. "I saw you in the basement. I hacked the cameras. You move like a soldier." "I'm the best history teacher you'll ever have," Sarah said, taking a sharp left to lose the tail. "Because I know how the bad guys write it." "What did you find on Hawthorne's server, Leo?" Leo pulled a crumpled notebook from his pocket. Hawthorne wasn't just the principal, he was laundering money for the construction crew. But he got cold feet. He found out what they were actually looking for. It's not just chemicals, it's gold. Confederate gold, melted down and hidden in chemical drums to bypass transport laws in the 1920s. It's a myth, but the map fits. Sarah finished. The stop digging note. He wasn't telling them to stop, he was telling himself to stop before he got killed, and he failed. "They know I saw the files," Leo whispered. "Vance called me to his office tomorrow." "You're not going to school tomorrow," Sarah said, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. The SUV was gaining. "Hold on." Sarah drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, a place with cash-only rooms and no cameras. She set Leo up with a burner phone and strict instructions to stay offline. "If I'm not back by dawn, you call the FBI tip line and drop the encryption key I gave you," she ordered. "Where are you going?" Leo asked, terrified. "Parent-teacher conference," Sarah said grimly. She drove back to the school under the cover of darkness. The black SUV was parked in the faculty lot. They were waiting for her. They expected her to run or to panic. They didn't expect a direct assault. Sarah didn't enter through a door. She climbed the trellis to the library window, shimmying the latch with a knife. She dropped silently onto the carpeted floor. The school was dark, but the principal's office, now Vance's office, had a light on. She crept down the hallway, using the lockers as cover. Voices drifted out. "She has the boy. Track his phone." That was Vance. "Phone is off. She's trained, Vance. Look at her personnel file again. It's too redacted. It's a ghost file." That was Vane, the counselor. Sarah reached the office door. She didn't have a gun, she had refused to carry one since leaving the agency, but she had the element of surprise and a fire extinguisher she had grabbed from the wall. She kicked the door. Not open, but closed. She jammed the extinguisher handle under the knob, trapping them inside. "Fire alarm," she whispered. She pulled the master alarm lever on the wall. The strobe lights exploded into life, and the deafening shriek of the siren filled the building. Chaos was her cover. As the strobes flashed, she saw the shadow of Miller, the security guard, rounding the corner at the far end of the hall. He had a weapon drawn, a silencer. This wasn't an extraction anymore, it was a war zone. Miller fired. The bullet shattered the trophy case next to Sarah's head, showering her with glass and gold-painted plastic. She dropped to a slide, taking the corner into the science wing. "Target is armed and dangerous," Miller lied over the radio. "Shoot on sight." Sarah needed a weapon. She burst into the chemistry lab. It had been years, but the recipes were simple: ammonia, iodine. She scrambled through the cabinets, her hands moving with muscle memory speed. She mixed a volatile contact explosive in a beaker, wrapping it in a rag. The door to the lab rattled. Miller was trying to bypass the electronic lock she had engaged. "Come out, Sarah, we can make a deal," Miller shouted. "Hawthorne was greedy, we can share the cut." "I'm on a teacher's salary, Miller," she yelled back, positioning herself behind the heavy lab table. "I'm used to making do with nothing." The glass of the door shattered. Miller stepped through, gun raised. Sarah threw the beaker. It wasn't a grenade, but when it hit the floor in front of him, the chemical reaction produced a blinding violet flash and a cloud of choking gas. Miller staggered back, coughing, firing blindly. Sarah lunged. She didn't strike to kill, she struck to dismantle. A palm strike to the wrist to dislodge the gun, a knee to the solar plexus to drop his guard, and a sleeper hold to end the conversation. Miller crumpled to the floor, unconscious. She grabbed his radio and his access card. She ignored the gun. "Miller?" Vance's voice crackled on the radio. "Report." "Miller's in detention," Sarah said into the mic, her voice ice cold. "I'm coming for the gradebook, Vance." Sarah sprinted to the server room in the basement. The fire alarm was still blaring, masking her footsteps. She had to upload the evidence from the USB drive to the district cloud before Vance cut the connection. The server room was cold, lit by the blinking blue LEDs of the racks. She sat at the main terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. Password, admin, override. The upload bar appeared. 10%, 20%. The door behind her hissed open. It wasn't Vance. It was Vane. The guidance counselor stood there, holding a taser. She didn't look like a counselor anymore. She stood with the balanced stance of a field operative. "I knew it," Vane said, smiling. "CIA or NSA, you have the tell." "DIA," Sarah corrected, not looking up from the screen. "Retired." "Nobody retires," Vane said. She fired the taser. Sarah anticipated the shot. She spun the leather back, letting the prongs absorb the shot. She rolled forward, using the chair as a battering ram. Vane sidestepped gracefully, pulling a baton from her blazer. They fought in the narrow aisle between the servers. It was brutal and fast, a clash of two highly trained women who knew every pressure point. Vane was younger, faster. Sarah was stronger, and she was fighting for something real. Vane landed a strike to Sarah's ribs. Sarah grunted, but used the momentum to sweep Vane's legs. Vane hit the floor but kicked up, knocking Sarah into a server rack. Sparks showered down. "The gold is gone, Sarah," Vane spat. "We moved it days ago. You're fighting for dust." "I don't care about the gold," Sarah panted, wiping blood from her lip. She glanced at the screen. Upload complete. "I care about the history." Sarah grabbed a loose cable and whipped it around Vane's wrist, securing her to the heavy rack. The upload had triggered an automatic district-wide alert. Every screen in every school, including the superintendent's home office, was now displaying the blueprints, the money laundering logs, and the video of Hawthorne's heart attack that Leo had recovered from the backup cache. Sirens wailed in the distance, real ones this time. Police, FBI. Sarah limped out of the basement. The fire alarm had finally cut off, leaving the school in a ringing silence. She made her way to the main lobby. Vance was there, trying to pry the front doors open. They were magnetically locked by the system lockdown Sarah had initiated. He turned, seeing Sarah. He looked small, pathetic, a bureaucrat caught in a trap of his own making. "You ruined everything," he hissed. "Do you know who backs us? This isn't just a few gold bars. This is a network." "Class is dismissed, Vance," Sarah said, leaning against a locker, exhausted. The glass doors shattered inward. SWAT teams poured into the lobby. "Federal agents, get down." Sarah raised her hands slowly. She let them cuff Vance. She let them sweep the building. When a frantic agent pointed a rifle at her, she calmly recited her service number. "Code Indigo November 4. Check the database." The agent froze, touched his earpiece, and then lowered his weapon. "Ma'am, we didn't know you were active." I'm not, Sarah said, pulling her cardigan tight around her bruised ribs. I'm just a teacher. 2 weeks later, the scandal had been national news, the gold digger principal. Vance and Vane were in federal custody. The toxic waste was being professionally cleared. Leo had been offered an internship with a cybersecurity firm, an apology from the FBI. Sarah sat at her desk. The classroom was quiet. The students were taking a test. Everything was back to normal, or as normal as it could be. She opened her drawer to put away her grading pen. There, sitting on top of her lesson planner, was a cream-colored envelope. Her heart stopped. It was identical to the one on Hawthorne's desk. She picked it up. Her hands didn't shake. She ripped it open. The note inside was typed in the same bold font, but it didn't say, "Stop digging." It read, "Welcome back, agent." Sarah stared at the paper. It wasn't a threat from the criminals. It was a reactivation notice from her old agency. Then she noticed the handwriting on the back of the note, a scrawl she recognized. It was Hawthorne's handwriting. "They were never looking for gold, Sarah. They were looking for the files I kept on you. I died to keep your cover. Don't let it be in vain." Sarah looked up. The classroom was peaceful. The sun was shining, but the illusion was shattered. Hawthorne hadn't been the villain, nor the victim of greed. He had been her handler, the one person protecting her new life from the enemies of her past. And by stopping the digging, she had exposed herself to the very people she had been hiding from. The phone on the wall began to ring. It wasn't the school ringtone. It was a secure line tone. Sarah stood up, walked to the phone, and lifted the receiver. "Cross speaking," she said. "I'm ready." She hung up, picked up her marker, and turned to the whiteboard. She erased the Prohibition era and wrote a new topic.